Hi guys, Matt Collins here from Beausoleil. In this video I want to talk to you about slack lines, tight lines and back leads. We're going to be looking at where to use them, tips, do's and don'ts and everything you need to know in order to make the right decisions out on the bank. Let's get into it now. Okay, to start with, let's have a look at slack line fishing. In order to get the optimum setup for slack line fishing, we need to get a few elements right. The first element we need to get right is the choice of main line. So I've got on some spools here with some 0.40 mono. This is rated at 18 pound. It's a heavy loaded sinking line. That's an important element. At the business end, we've got a metre of rig tubing or a metre of leadless leader. We need that to help sink the last metre of the line. Now it's really important that we choose the right lead system for slackline fishing. In my experience, it's no good trying to fish with a traditional lead clip or a standard semi-fixed lead setup for slackline fishing. You'll get terrible bite indication and the carp are going to get away with it more often than not. Today I've chosen my standard trick running lead setup. So got a little telltale bead on here, and when the carp picks up the rig, it's going to give it a shake, bonk, and it's away. This gives me great bite indication and it stops the carp getting away with it as well. Another perfectly decent option for slackline fishing is to fish a pure running lead setup. So if I take the telltale bead away, we've just got a pure running lead like that, and that's going to give us plenty of bite indication, which is exactly what we need for this setup. The rig itself is simplicity itself. Single bait, outturned eye hook and 20 centimetres of 25 pound mono hook link, knotless knotted to a size 6 outturned eye hook. Really simple, very robust, and I've just done a loop to loop connection to join that to the swivel there. So that's the setup. Now let's have a look at where we should use this kind of rig. So here at Beausoleil there are loads of little spots that are perfect for slackline fishing. I've just chosen one off to my left here. It's a little chuck, it's barely 20 yards. I've got some overhanging trees to miss as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to perform this cast from a kind of squatting, kneeling position so I can get the lead in low, miss the tree cover, hit the clip and land it exactly where I want. Let's have a go at that. In order to keep the cast low, I'm going to keep the lead fairly close to the tip of the rod. Perfect. When you're doing tricky little casts like that, always take the rig off so you can have a few goes at it to make sure you get it right. Once you're happy with the setup and what you're doing, then it's time to put a rig on and actually make the cast for real. Okay, so I looped the rig on. Let's have a go with the cast for real now. Spot on. So my setup for this tricky little spot, we got individual bank rests, rear, alarm at the front. The whole setup is pointing directly at this spot. I've got an aerator behind me, so I need to be able to stop the fish very, very quickly should we get a pickup. It's very important that the line is in a straight line to the spot. So I just tighten that down. I'm just going to tease it through the meniscus there by just jagging the rod tip. That's sinking away there nice. Then I can put it on the rests and complete the setup. When you are slackline fishing, you don't want to be in a rush to actually put the bobbin on. It can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even 15 minutes for that line to fully sink. If you race to put the bobbin on too soon, then you're not going to get the best out of this setup. This has been about 5 minutes now. So I'm going to pop a very lightweight bobbin on. I have different bobbins and different weights for different situations. This is a very lightweight plastic bobbin. I've taken all the additional weights off as well. I've got a reasonably long chain on here so that the bobbin's almost kind of touching the deck. That's how it should sit when you slackline fishing, hanging very, very limp like that. Line's going limp through the rings and the line coming off the end of the rod in a nice big soft arc. I've put my line in the line clip here just to help accentuate the indication of the bobbin. I'm fishing fairly close to an aerator, so I want a pretty stiff clutch there, just so that the whole thing's going to be very solid and secure should I get a take. Now I can put the alarm on, check the sensitivity, and yeah, we're ready to go. So that's how I set up for slackline fishing. It's perfect for close quarters situations like this, up to 20 yards, 30 yards, something like that. You can fish close to obstacles with them as long as you're safe. Rule of thumb, I should stop about 5 meters short of the obstacle, but only if I've got a really solid setup and a really firm clutch. And I certainly wouldn't do this at night either. For fishing at range in a more open water environment, I don't think slacklines are appropriate. For those situations, you need to be looking at backleads and or just a tight line. Let's have a look at those other options now. I use backleads a lot in my fishing because a lot of my fishing is done at medium range. I must admit I don't tend to use flying backleads, I just stick to the basic kind of clip-on ones. I do use the captive style backleads when I'm out on the river, but most of the time it's just the standard simple clip-on running backlead. So my setup for my medium range fishing is the same as the short range fishing. Actually, we got 0.40 mono, and then leadless leader, trick running lead system, and a very basic mono rig. When I'm talking about medium range, to my mind I'm talking about kind of 50 to 80 yards. I've just picked a spot at 50 yards here, put a rig on, and I'll show you the setup. Okay, that rig's on the money now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to pay off some line. Need to have enough slack line so I can basically hold the rod and hold the line below the rod tip. Reach around in my pocket, and just going to clip on a 1 ounce backlead. I've got 2 bank sticks here set up pointing exactly at the spot that I'm targeting. So it's all going to be lined up here. Nice tight line actually to the rig, so we haven't got any kind of bow in it, and let him go, plop him down. That's lovely. I'm just going to set him up on 2 individual sticks again. You've got to be very careful when you do this that you don't put any tension on the line at all. That line's still slack, because the last thing you want to do is be moving the rig or disturbing the backlead. Secure that in place like that. Now, because we're using a backlead, it's not a problem to clip the bobbin on fairly early in the process. Now you see I've got a much shorter chain on this bobbin. I've got 2 weights on here. It's either 1 weight or 2 weights, and I've got a heavier metal style head, so that's going to give me a nice weight for this setup. Just going to back the clutch off a bit. There we go. Line in the clip, and a lot of the time I set the bobbin flat or roughly flat like that. So we've got nice bite indication like this. We've got plenty of upward indication there, and if I pop that out the clip, a bit of drop back as well. So that's the bobbin set, that's the clutch set, alarm on. If you see the end of the rod there, the line's kind of exiting at about kind of 45 degrees. You don't want the backlead to be dropping right underneath the tip, because you get a very acute angle and it really compromises the bite indication. somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees, I guess. There's no point really in sliding the back lead way out there unless you're trying to back lead at massive range, but that's the way I set it for 50 to 80 yard range type of thing. Okay, let's have a look at my tight line setup. This rod is configured for long range carp fishing. We've got 0.30 mono, we've got 6 meters of leader. At the business end, we've got a cut down leader with a helicopter rig. So long range fishing is something I don't do at Beausoleil, it's something I do out on the larger French public waters, but I can show you the process. It's very, very important when you're fishing at long range that you keep the line as straight as. So as soon as that lead punched through the water there, I engaged the bail arm, wound down, kept the rod low, because you don't want the wind taking the line left or right. So again, I'm going to use just a simple pair of bank sticks pointing directly at the rig. Set that securely on there. Now that rig's a good 120, possibly more yards away. We can set the clutch. Let's get the bobbin on. So you can see for this, again, I'm using a short chain, double weights, heavy metal bobbin head as well. So this is about the heaviest bobbin I've got. It's perhaps not perfect, but it's good enough for my needs. We're fishing at long range. You know, we're not expecting twitchy bites. This is either going to roar off or it's not. Put the alarm on here. You can see, yeah, we've still got some indication there, and if I just slacken off the clutch a bit, if we do get a take, all that's going to happen is that's going to ping out the clip, and it's either going to drop like that or start sailing off like that. I do tend to find myself fishing a slacker clutch when I'm fishing at range, because I'm wanting the initial hit, the initial kind of hooking force to be that line clip, and then I'm using the kind of clutch as a kind of secondary indication because I've got very little movement on the bobbin here. You can see the lines going bowstring tight out to that rig, and at that range, that's how I want it. So that's my long range tight line setup. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to fish this at short range or even medium range, especially on shallow water. If you're fishing medium range on a really deep venue, then sure, this is an appropriate method. Certainly here at Beausoleil, when it's shallow and we're only fishing medium range, you know, if you fish bowstring tight lines across to your spots, the fish are just going to spook off them and not come anywhere near them. Fishing tight lines I reserve exclusively for long range work, and you know, you can't fish any other way. To finish, let's have a chat about semi-slack lines. I don't use semi-slack lines a lot in my fishing, but there's definitely a time and a place for them. I tend to use semi-slack lines when I'm doing kind of short, focused little morning sessions or afternoon sessions. It's more of a daytime tactic for me. Distance wise, I like to use semi-slack lines between the 30 yard to 50 yard type of range, and I tend to only use semi-slack lines when I've got one, maybe two rods. I wouldn't ever consider using the semi-slack approach when I'm using 3 rods, especially when there's not much depth of water. The problem is, if I get a pickup on 1 rod, I'm often going to be playing that fish over lines, and without a back lead to keep that line out of the way, then it's very difficult to play fish over multiple semi-slack lines. If the water's deeper and I can pass the rod underneath another rod, then that gives me more options. But for the sort of fishing that I do, I don't often find myself fishing in those type of situations. I tend to use semi-slack lines a lot when fishing the shallows, especially if I know a shallow area has got lots of ups and downs in the contours. I don't want a tight line cutting straight through the water, but at the same time I don't want a slack line that's going to give me poor indication at the kind of 30 to 50 yard range. When I'm doing short session angling, I tend to fish a little closer to obstacles than I would normally be doing during a night session. And in this situation, a semi-slack line keeps me in closer contact with the fish. I'm going to get better bite indication, so I know as soon as that fish has picked up that rig. So there we go, that's my thoughts on slack lines, tight lines and back leads. Use the right one in the right situation and you're sure to be successful in your fishing. If you've got any questions or comments, do leave us a note and I'll do my best to get back to you.